The Cumberland River caught the last light of the October sun, like a mirror cracked down the middle, beautiful and broken at the same time. Nashville glittered on both banks, its skyline a jagged silhouette against a sky that couldn't decide between purple and gold. From the window of the production van parked behind Bridgestone Arena, Dale Whitmore watched the city he had given his entire life to, and felt, for the first time in 31 years, like a stranger in it. "Dale!" The voice came from behind him, sharp and clipped. "We have a situation." He didn't turn around immediately. He let himself have one more second with the river, one more breath of the cold air sneaking through the cracked window. Then he turned. Priya Okafor, his production coordinator, stood in the narrow doorway of the van with a tablet pressed against her chest, and an expression that Dale had learned to dread over 8 years of working together. It wasn't panic. Priya didn't panic. It was something worse. It was the face she made when the problem had no clean solution. "Talk to me," Dale said. "Robbie Callahan is gone." The words landed like a dropped mic on an empty stage. Dale stared at her for a moment, waiting for the punchline, the correction, the qualifier that would make those 4 words mean something less catastrophic than what they sounded like. It didn't come. "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean his dressing room is empty, his stylist is crying in the hallway, and his guitarist just told me that Robbie walked out of the building 40 minutes ago in street clothes carrying nothing but his phone and his keys." Priya stepped fully into the van and slid the door shut behind her. "He's not answering calls. Not mine, not the labels, not anyone's." Dale pressed both hands flat against the small folding table bolted to the van wall and stared at the surface of it. There was a coffee ring stain shaped vaguely like the state of Tennessee. He focused on it. "He's the closing act," Dale said, as if Priya didn't know, as if saying it out loud might reverse the reality of it. "I know. He's closing the American Country Music Heritage Awards, live, on network television, in..." Dale looked at his watch. 2 hours and 17 minutes. "I know, Dale. There are 4.3 million people who bought tickets to the live stream alone. There are..." "Dale." Her voice was firm, but not unkind. "I know all of that. What I need to know is what we do." He straightened up and ran both hands through his hair, which had gone fully silver in the last 3 years, and which his daughter Claire had once told him made him look distinguished, and which he himself thought made him look exhausted. Because that's what it was. Not distinction, just exhaustion made visible. He was 61 years old, and he had produced 17 consecutive Heritage Award ceremonies without a single on-air disaster. 17 years. He had managed wardrobe malfunctions, sound failures, a fist fight between 2 nominees in 2019 that had been kept entirely out of the press, and one genuinely terrifying moment in 2021 when a pyrotechnics malfunction had nearly taken out the entire stage rigging. He had survived all of it. But he had never lost a closing act 2 hours before showtime. "Where's Claire?" he asked. "Script room. She's been rewriting the presenter segments all afternoon." Donna moved things around again at the last minute. Something tightened in Dale's chest at the mention of Donna Hargrove's name. He filed it away. One crisis at a time. "Tell Claire what happened. I need her thinking about contingency runtime. If we lose the closing performance, we need to know exactly how much time we're looking at filling, and with what." He was already moving toward the door, reaching for his jacket. "And get me a list of every artist confirmed in that building tonight. Every single one." Bridgestone Arena on Heritage Awards night was a specific kind of organized madness that Dale had come to know as intimately as his own heartbeat. He moved through the backstage corridors with the automatic confidence of a man who had memorized every turn, every junction, every fire exit. The air smelled of hairspray and catered food and that particular brand of nervous energy that only live television generated, a faint electrical charge that seemed to come from the walls themselves. He passed the main dressing room corridor, nodded to the security team stationed at the entrance, and pushed through the door marked Production, authorized only into the long hallway that connected the stage wing to the production hub. The hallway was busier than it should have been at this hour, which told him the news about Robbie was already spreading through the crew. He stopped a PA named Kevin Aldrich, a 24-year-old from Knoxville, who had been with him for 2 seasons and who had the useful quality of knowing everything that happened in a building before Dale did. "Kevin? Robbie Callahan? What do you know?" Kevin glanced left and right in the automatic way of someone accustomed to working in environments where information was currency. "I heard it's about his contract," he said, lowering his voice. "Something about the new album deal. Somebody told his guitarist that the label restructured his royalty terms without telling him, and he only found out today. Like, today, this afternoon. Who told you this?" His guitarist told one of the stage managers, who told, "Which label?" Kevin hesitated. "Hargrove Records." There it was. Dale kept his face neutral. "Thank you, Kevin." He moved on. The production hub was a converted conference space 3 levels below the main arena floor, lined with monitors showing every camera feed, every backstage angle, every exterior approach. It smelled permanently of cold coffee and printer toner. Claire Whitmore was standing at the long central table when Dale walked in, her script pages spread in front of her, a red pen moving across them with the precise economy of someone who had been editing under pressure since before she could legally drink. She looked up when he entered. She had her mother's eyes, a gray-green that shifted depending on the light and on her mood. And right now, they were the color of a storm moving in off the coast. "Priya told me," she said. "I'm already working on it." "What's the runtime gap if we cut the closing performance entirely?" 22 minutes. She said it without checking her notes. "Possibly 25 if we lose the walk-off and the post-performance interview segment that was built around him." 22 minutes of live network television, Dale said. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down heavily. "On a night when the broadcast is already running tight." "I know." She set down the red pen. "Dad, there are options. We could extend the tribute to Carl Henderson. That's already on the program, and we could add another 2 or 3 songs without it feeling padded. We could give extra time to the last 2 award presentations. We could—" "Those are delay tactics," Dale said. "Those buy us maybe 8 minutes total. We still need a headliner." Claire was quiet for a moment. She picked up her pen again, turned it between her fingers. There was something in the way she was holding herself, a slight rigidity across her shoulders, a careful stillness, that Dale had learned over the years meant she was thinking about something she wasn't ready to say. "What?" he said. "Nothing. Let me keep working on the rundown." "Claire." She looked at him. The storm in her eyes had shifted to something more specific, more personal, and Dale felt the familiar sensation of standing on ground that might give way. "Let me focus on the show right now," she said quietly. "Please." He recognized a boundary when he saw one. He nodded. "George Strait is here tonight," said a voice from the doorway. They both turned. Priya was leaning against the doorframe, tablet in hand, with the expression of someone who had just thought of something important. "He's receiving the Legacy Award in the second hour," she continued. "He's been in the building since 4 o'clock. He came for the full event, dinner, the whole thing. I just confirmed with his team." Dale stared at her. "He's here as a guest," Dale said carefully. "An honoree. We can't just—" "His team loves you," Priya said. "You worked with them on the 2018 tribute special." His manager, Bill Reeves, has been saying for 2 years that George would do anything for this show. Asking him to cover a 22-minute gap in the live broadcast 2 hours before showtime isn't. It's a conversation, Priya said. That's all I'm saying. Have the conversation. Dale looked at Claire. Claire was looking at her script pages. The pen had gone still in her hand. He stood up. Where is he? George Strait was in the green room reserved for legacy honorees, sitting in one of the low armchairs with a bottle of water and a plate of fruit that looked mostly untouched, talking quietly with a man Dale recognized as Bill Reeves, his longtime manager. George was dressed for the evening. Dark suit, white shirt, that particular quality of ease that some men carry in formal clothes, as if the formality belongs to them rather than the other way around. He was 74 years old, and he looked like a man who had made peace with time. He looked up when Dale entered, and his face broke into the kind of smile that felt personal, even if you'd only met someone twice. "Dale Whitmore," he said, standing to shake hands. "I was hoping I'd see you tonight before the thing got started." "George." Dale shook his hand, then Bill's. "I'm sorry to interrupt. I need about 5 minutes of your time, and I want to be straight with you about why." George studied him for a moment with those calm eyes, and then gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down and tell me." Dale sat. He told him everything, quickly and honestly. Robbie Callahan gone, 22 minutes of live television to fill, the options that didn't quite add up. He didn't dress it up or frame it as anything other than what it was, a problem and a request. When he finished, George was quiet for a moment. Bill Reeves started to speak, something cautious, beginning with, "Well, obviously the circumstances here are," but George raised one hand slightly. Not rudely, just enough to pause the sentence. "You want me to go out there and play?" George said. "It wasn't really a question. I want to ask if you'd be willing to," Dale said. "There's a difference." George picked up the water bottle, took a slow drink, set it down. "What songs are you thinking?" Something in Dale's chest loosened very slightly. "Whatever you want," he said. "Your band is here?" "Most of them came with me for the tribute performance in the second hour. I'd need to make some calls." He glanced at Bill. "Get them in here." Bill was already reaching for his phone. "Dale," George said, and his voice had shifted into something quieter, more considered. "There's one condition." "Name it." "I want to know why that kid walked out. Not rumors, not label PR. I want to know what actually happened." He met Dale's eyes steadily. "Because if this is what I think it is, if somebody did something to that boy that wasn't right, then I'm not going to pretend it's just a scheduling problem. I'll go out there and I'll sing, but I won't be part of covering something up." Dale held his gaze. The ground felt firm under his feet for the first time in the last 40 minutes. "I'll find out," Dale said. "You have my word." The document was 11 pages long. Claire had printed it herself, in the small copy room adjacent to the production hub, feeding the pages through with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be. She had read it twice already, once on her laptop screen, once in print, and both times she had reached the same conclusion: cold and clear as creek water in January. She knew about the contract because she had found it 3 weeks ago in a folder her father didn't know she could access. She had found it because she had been looking for something else entirely: the archive files from the 2023 ceremony, which she needed for a historical reference segment she was writing. She had clicked on the wrong subfolder, and the document had opened, and she had read the header: Callahan, A.R. Amendment to Recording Agreement, Executed Hargrove Records. Confidential. And then she had read the rest of it. And then she had sat very still in her apartment for a long time. The amendment restructured Robbie Callahan's royalty rate on his forthcoming third album from the standard .15 down to .08, a reduction of nearly half, buried in a clause on page 7 under the heading Supplementary Compensation Adjustments in language that required 2 readings and a working knowledge of music industry contracts to fully understand. The clause had been inserted into the amendment 6 weeks after the original agreement was signed. The signature on the amendment was Robbie Callahan's, but the initials on the modification clause, the small box in the bottom corner of page 7 that indicated acknowledgement of the specific terms, were not Robbie's. They were her father's. She found Kevin Aldrich in the hallway outside the production hub and asked him to find Robbie Callahan's guitarist, a man named Pete Shriver, according to the show's musician roster, and bring him to the small storage room at the end of the corridor that nobody used during shows. Pete Shriver arrived 7 minutes later, still in his stage clothes, a tall, lean man in his late 30s with the kind of face that had spent a lot of time outdoors and the eyes of someone who was deciding whether to trust the person in front of him. "You're Dale Whitmore's daughter," he said, not sitting down. "Yes," Claire said. "I'm also the head writer for this broadcast, and I have exactly no interest in managing this situation the way the label wants it managed. I want to know what Robbie knows and when he found out." Pete studied her. The fluorescent light in the storage room was merciless, and neither of them looked good in it. "Why?" "Because I've read the amendment," she said. A long pause. "Today," Pete said finally. "He found out today. His entertainment lawyer called him this morning." The lawyer had been doing a routine audit of the label's accounting submissions and found the discrepancy in the royalty calculation. The lawyer pulled the amendment, read it, called Robbie. He crossed his arms over his chest. Robbie's been in this business since he was 19 years old. He trusted those people. He signed what they put in front of him because they told him it was standard procedure. "The modification on page 7, Claire said. "The initials." Pete's eyes narrowed. "You really did read it. What do the initials stand for?" "Robbie doesn't know," Pete said. "His lawyer thinks it might be a production exec or a business affairs person at the label who approved the change internally. Could be anyone." He paused. "Could be someone who had access to the original deal documents." Claire kept her face very carefully neutral. "Where is Robbie now?" "I genuinely don't know. He texted me about an hour ago. Said he was sorry. Said he couldn't stand up there and perform for an audience while Donna Hargrove was sitting in the front row like everything was fine." Pete's voice didn't harden, exactly. It just became very flat, the way voices do when emotion has been compressed into something dense and controlled. "He's not wrong." "No," Claire said quietly. "He's not." After Pete left, she stood alone in the storage room for a moment with the 11 pages in her hands. She thought about her father. She thought about the version of her father she had grown up with, the man who had driven her to every school concert, who had read her stories with different voices for every character, who had taught her to love Nashville not as an industry, but as a place with a soul, who had told her 100 times in 100 different ways that the only thing that mattered in this business was doing right by the artists, because the artists were the whole point, the beginning and the end of everything. She thought about his initials on page 7. Then she folded the pages, put them in the inside pocket of her jacket, and went to find Donna Hargrove. Donna Hargrove occupied the kind of space that powerful people always seem to generate around themselves, a radius of deference, a slight gravitational pull that made other people adjust their trajectories slightly to avoid entering her orbit uninvited. She was 58, immaculately put together in a way that suggested the immaculateness was not effort, but simply the natural state of someone who had never allowed herself a moment of disorder. Her hair was the color of dark honey. Her eyes were the color of nothing in particular and saw everything. She had her own suite backstage. Not a dressing room, a suite which she had insisted upon in the event sponsorship agreement, and which Dale had quietly approved without argument, because Hargrove Records was the primary sponsor of the Heritage Awards for the 4th consecutive year. And that was the kind of thing you didn't argue about. Claire knocked. "Come." The suite was warm and smelled of the specific floral arrangement that Donna's assistant always ordered for events. White orchids, no greenery, absolutely no lilies. Donna was seated at a small vanity doing nothing, just sitting, looking at her own reflection with the focused stillness of someone engaged in an internal conversation. She met Claire's eyes in the mirror. "Claire Whitmore," she said. "Here to tell me about our little problem? Here to talk to you about Robbie Callahan's contract," Claire said, and she kept her voice level because she had rehearsed this sentence in her head for 20 minutes, and she was not going to let it come out any way other than level. Donna turned from the mirror slowly, in the way of someone who is not surprised, but is deciding how to frame the fact of not being surprised. "That's a label matter," she said. "The initials on the modification clause on page 7, Claire said. DW. A pause. Short, precise, controlled. "That's a very significant leap," Donna said. "Is it? DW could be any number of people." "In the context of this deal," Claire said, "in the context of my father's relationship with your label over the last 6 years, in the context of the fact that he co-executive produced Robbie Callahan's first 2 albums under a production consulting arrangement with Hargrove Records." She stopped herself. She could feel her voice wanting to rise, and she wouldn't let it. "No, it's not a leap." Donna looked at her for a long moment. Her expression was not guilt. It was something more complicated, and in some ways more disturbing. It was assessment. She was calculating. "Your father," Donna said carefully, "is a man who has made a great many decisions over a great many years in a business that is not clean. That has never been clean. The decisions he made were made in the context of business relationships and financial pressures that you, writing your scripts in your little room, have never had to navigate." "Don't," Claire said. The word came out sharp, a single clean cut. "I'm not defending anything," Donna said. "I'm providing context. You put him in a position where he had to choose between his integrity and his career. And then you used his choice against an artist who trusted both of you." Claire's hands were very still at her sides. "That's not context. That's manipulation." Donna stood up from the vanity. She was a tall woman, and she used height the way some people used silence, as a tool. "What exactly do you intend to do with what you think you know?" she said. "Robbie Callahan deserves to know the truth about who approved that modification," Claire said. "And my father deserves the chance to tell it himself before someone else does. And if he doesn't want to, that's his choice to make," Claire said. "Not yours." She left before Donna could respond, because she had learned a long time ago that the most powerful move in a conversation with a person like Donna Hargrove was to be the one who ended it. Dale was in the stage wing when she found him, standing at the edge of the curtain, looking out at the arena floor that was filling steadily now. 12,000 seats, most of them occupied, the low roar of a crowd settling into their places. The production monitors above the wing showed camera feeds. The stage, the press area, the front row where the nominees and label executives and industry veterans were arranged in the careful geography of industry power. Donna Hargrove's seat was in the front row, center left. It was currently empty. Claire stood beside her father for a moment without speaking. He glanced at her sideways. "You found something," he said. It wasn't a question. He knew her too well. She was aware of this, had been aware of it her entire life. The particular quality of being known by someone who loved you, which was simultaneously the most comforting and the most exposed feeling she had ever experienced. "Dad!" She kept her voice quiet, underneath the noise of the arena. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly." He turned to look at her fully. In the stage lighting, the gray of his hair looked silver-white, and his face had the expression she had only seen a handful of times in her life. The expression of a man who already knows the question and is deciding whether he is ready for the answer he'll have to give. "The modification clause in Robbie Callahan's contract amendment," she said. Page 7. The initials. A long silence. 12,000 people murmuring in the arena beyond the curtain. Somewhere in the rigging above them, a lighting technician was making a final adjustment and a chain clinked softly against a metal bar. "How did you find it?" Dale said. "It doesn't matter how I found it," she said. "Did you approve it?" His jaw tightened. He looked back out at the arena. "It's more complicated than—" "Dad." Her voice broke on the word, just slightly, just enough. "Did you approve it?" The silence this time was different. It had a shape to it. "Yes," he said. George Strait walked out onto the stage of Bridgestone Arena at 9:47 in the evening, and the arena responded the way arenas respond to certain people. Not with the immediate calculated explosion of a manufactured moment, but with something organic and accumulative. A wave of recognition and love that started at the front row and rolled backward through 12,000 people until the sound was enormous and warm and completely unplanned. He hadn't been announced. Dale had made the decision, in the frantic 30 minutes of backstage reorganization, that an announcement would set an expectation, and expectations were something they couldn't afford tonight. Instead, the lights had simply shifted. The post-award presentation lighting had faded slightly, the stage had gone to a warmer tone, and George had walked out from the wing with his guitar, and the crowd had understood, the way crowds sometimes do, that something unrehearsed was happening, and they had risen to meet it. He stood at the microphone for a moment before speaking, letting the sound wash over him without hurrying it. Then he leaned in, easy and unhurried. "I'm going to be honest with you," he said, and the arena quieted with the speed of an audience that senses something real coming. "I was supposed to just sit in that front row tonight and look distinguished. Laughter. Warm. Immediate. Real. But it turns out they need a little music right now. And I've never in my life said no to that." He looked back over his shoulder at the 5 musicians assembled behind him. His own guitarist and bassist, supplemented by 2 house musicians and his longtime drummer Terry Kowalski, who had driven across Nashville in 40 minutes after a phone call, and gave a small nod. Then he began to play. The first song was Amarillo by Morning, because it was the song he had played more times than he could count, and because it still meant everything it had ever meant. And the arena knew every word and sang them back at him in a single, massive voice that filled the room to its rafters. From the production hub, Claire watched on the monitors. She was sitting in the chair she had occupied for most of the evening, but she was no longer looking at her script pages. Her script pages were on the table in front of her, the red pen capped, the revisions done. There was nothing left to revise. The show was running, and George Strait was buying them time. And somewhere in this building, or somewhere in this city, Robbie Callahan was sitting with the weight of what had been done to him, and somewhere in this building, her father was sitting with the weight of what he had done. She had left him in the stage wing after he said yes. She hadn't been able to stay. She had walked back to the production hub on feet that felt strange and heavy, and she had sat down, and she had done the work that needed doing. The runtime adjustments, the segment revisions, the communication with the broadcast director about the change in closing act. She had done all of it with a professional precision that felt entirely disconnected from the person doing it, like watching herself from a slight distance. On the monitor, George was moving into his second song. The crowd was still completely with him. Priya slid into the seat next to Claire and set a cup of coffee on the table. "Runtime is looking manageable," she said quietly. "If he does 4 songs at roughly 4 to 5 minutes each, we land within 90 seconds of our broadcast window." "He'll do more than 4, Claire said. Priya looked at her. "How do you know?" Claire watched George on the monitor, the way he stood, the way his guitar fit against his body, the way he was tilting his head slightly toward the audience as if listening to something underneath the noise of 12,000 people singing. "He knows something's wrong," Claire said. "Not just the missing act. Something underneath that. He asked my dad to find out what happened with Robbie, and I don't think anyone's told him yet." She paused. People like George Strait can feel when there's a wound in a room. They always play longer when there is. In the green room, Dale was on the phone. He had been on the phone for 20 minutes, working through the sequence of calls that the situation required. The broadcast network, the label's PR team, the show's legal counsel, the Heritage Awards executive board chairman. Each call was a version of the same exercise: managing information, controlling the story, channeling the facts into the shape that caused the least damage to the most people. He was good at it. He had been good at it for 31 years. He hung up the 4th call and sat with the phone in his hand. Through the wall, he could hear the arena, the muffled, enormous sound of 12,000 people and a guitar. He knew that sound intimately. He had spent his career inside that sound, backstage or in production trucks or in green rooms exactly like this one. Tethered to the music by wires and schedules and logistics, always slightly outside of it. Always managing the conditions in which other people got to be inside it. He thought about the day he had first heard Robbie Callahan. A showcase at a small venue on Division Street 4 years ago. A kid from Denton, Texas, 23 years old, who played guitar like it was a conversation he was having with something invisible and sang with the kind of unguarded honesty that you could not manufacture, could only find by accident in people who hadn't learned yet to protect themselves. Dale had called Bill Reeves that same night and said, "You need to hear this kid." He had been the first call. He had been the reason. And then, 18 months later, in a conference room at Hargrove Records, Donna had shown him the amendment, had explained the financial rationale, the label's investment in Robbie's development costs, the standard practice of adjusting royalty structures after initial recording cycles, the industry norms, had placed the document in front of him, had said, very quietly, that his consulting arrangement with the label, the arrangement that represented 40% of his annual income, was contingent on his continued cooperation on matters of artist management. He had signed. He had told himself it was the business. He had told himself Robbie was young and would make the money back on touring and merchandise. He had told himself 100 things over 18 months, with the practiced efficiency of a man who had learned how to not look directly at something. His daughter's voice. "Did you approve it?" His own voice. "Yes." He set the phone down on the cushion beside him and stared at the wall. Robbie Callahan was sitting in a bar called The Station on Lower Broadway, 3 blocks from the arena, with a glass of bourbon he hadn't touched, and his phone on the table screen down, and he was watching a country music show playing silently on the TV above the bar, a rerun, something from the 90s, a man in a hat playing, to a crowd that looked genuinely happy to be there. And Robbie was thinking about being 9 years old and watching something exactly like this on the television in his parents' kitchen in Denton, and deciding, with the absolute and irrational certainty available only to 9-year-olds, that this was what he was going to do with his life. He was 27 years old. He had done the thing he decided to do at 9. He had worked for it with everything he had. The years of playing for 20 people, the years of living on nothing, the showcase circuit and the rejection circuit, and the endless grind of trying to get someone in a position to listen to actually listen. And then the moment when someone did listen, when Dale Whitmore had walked up to him after the Division Street showcase and shaken his hand and said, "Son, I think you're the real thing." He picked up the bourbon, put it down again without drinking. His phone screen lit up. He didn't look at it immediately. Then he turned it over. The text was from a number he didn't recognize. "My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm Dale's daughter. I know what happened with your contract. All of it, including who approved the modification clause. I think you deserve to know the full truth before this night is over. If you want to talk, I'm in the building. I'll come to you if you tell me where you are." Robbie stared at the screen for a long time. The TV above the bar was still playing the 90s country show. Silent. The man in the hat was still playing to the happy crowd. Robbie picked up his phone and typed an address. She found him exactly where he said he'd be, at a corner table in the station, looking younger than he did on album covers and older than he had any right to look at 27. She slid into the chair across from him and put the folded pages on the table between them. He looked at the pages, looked at her. "You printed it," he said. "I wanted you to be able to read it yourself," she said. "Not a screen. Paper." He unfolded the pages slowly. Read. His face was very still while he read, in the way of a person who has learned to contain a great deal in a small space. She watched him turn to page 7 and stop. "DW," he said quietly. "Yes." He set the pages down flat on the table. His hands were steady. She noticed this. "Dale Whitmore," he said. "Yes." A long pause. The bar noise around them was a steady ambient roar. Jukebox, conversation, the clink of glasses. Someone was laughing loudly near the entrance. "He's the reason I got signed," Robbie said. It wasn't an accusation or an expression of hurt. It was a simple fact, stated in the tone of someone sorting through a newly rearranged reality. "I know," Claire said. "He told me, the night I met him, that the only thing that mattered to him in this business was doing right by the artists." He looked at her. "I believed him. I believed him for 4 years." "He believed it too," Claire said. "I think he still does, somewhere. Which is part of why this happened. People don't always do the worst things out of greed or cruelty. Sometimes they do them because they're afraid. And they spend the rest of the time constructing reasons why it wasn't as bad as it was." Robbie was quiet for a moment. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. "He's your father." "Because you deserve to know the truth," she said. "And because he deserves the chance to face it. Both things can be true." "Does he know you found the contract?" "Yes. I confronted him 2 hours ago." She looked down at the table. He admitted it. Robbie absorbed this. He picked up the bourbon glass, turned it in his hand, set it back down without drinking. "What does he want to do about it?" "I don't know," Claire said honestly. "I left before we could get there." Another silence. Then Robbie looked at her with an expression that was tired and clear, and somehow older than his face. "George Strait is in that building," he said. "Yes. He's playing right now. Playing for time." "Yes." Something shifted in Robbie's expression. Not resolution, exactly, but the beginning of it. A slight change in the set of his jaw. A faint adjustment in his eyes that said a decision was forming. "George Strait is in there playing for time," he said again, mostly to himself. "Then, he played a showcase in Denton when I was 11. It was the first real concert I ever went to." He paused. "I need to think about something. Give me a few minutes." She nodded and sat back and gave him the few minutes. Dale found George in the wing. It was between the second and third songs. George had stepped back to confer with Terry Kowalski about tempo, and the arena was riding the brief pause with the warm noise of a crowd that wasn't going anywhere, that had surrendered the evening entirely to this unexpected thing happening in front of them. In the wing, the lighting was low and practical, and George was standing with one hand on his guitar neck, listening to something Terry was saying about the arrangement. He saw Dale approach and held up one finger. A moment. Then turned back to Terry, said something brief, and gave a small nod. Terry returned to the drums. George turned to Dale. "How are we doing?" George said. "Runtime is manageable. You've got another 12 to 15 minutes if you can give it." George studied him. "That's not what you came back here to tell me." Dale looked at him. At 74, George Strait had the kind of face that honest living builds over decades. Not unlined, not unmarked, but clear. The eyes especially. They were steady, and they didn't demand anything, which somehow made it harder to be evasive in front of them. "I found out about Robbie," Dale said. "Tell me." So Dale told him. All of it. The contract, the modification, the initials. He told it plainly, without the softening language he had used on himself for 18 months. Without the industry rationale and the financial context. He told it the way his daughter had made him see it, stripped of the protective layers he had built around it. George listened without interrupting. When Dale finished, the arena was still making its warm, sustained noise. 12,000 people waiting for the next song. Patient and present. "The initials are yours," George said. Not a question. Yes. George was quiet for a moment. He looked out toward the stage, toward the lights and the crowd. "How long have you been in this business?" he said. 31 years. "You know how many times I've seen this?" George said. His voice wasn't condemning. It was something more complex, a kind of weariness maybe, or the specific grief of a man who has watched the same story play out in slightly different forms across decades. Good people, Dale. People who got into this because they loved the music and they believed in what it could do. And then the business starts to lean on them. And the leaning doesn't stop. And somewhere along the way, they make a decision that they know isn't right. And then they make another one to cover the first. And then they're so far inside it, they can't see the way back. "I knew it wasn't right," Dale said. "When I signed it, I knew." "I know you knew," George said. "That's the thing about people like you. You always know. That's what makes it harder." A pause. "What are you going to do about it?" George said. "I don't know yet." George looked at him again with those clear, steady eyes. "Yes, you do," he said simply. Then he turned back toward the stage. "Give me 4 more minutes, and then send someone to find that kid." The call to Robbie came from an unexpected number. Terry Kowalski's cell. Because Terry was the one person in the building that Robbie still had saved in his contacts from 3 years ago when they'd played a small festival in Gruene, Texas, and shared a meal afterward. Terry had called at George's instruction, and he'd said only, "George wants to know if you'd come back to the building. Not to perform, just to come back. He wants to talk to you himself." Claire was still at the table in the station when Robbie got the call. She watched his face as he listened. He hung up and looked at her. "Terry Kowalski just called me," he said, with the tone of a man who is trying to calibrate the strangeness of a situation. "George asked him to," she said. "How did you—" "I didn't," she said. "That was George." Robbie sat with this for a moment. Then he stood up, left money on the table for the untouched bourbon, and picked up his phone. "You coming?" he said. She stood up. "Yes." They came in through the loading dock entrance on the south side of the arena, Claire's lanyard getting them past the security checkpoint, Robbie's face getting recognized by a security officer who was kind enough to say nothing beyond a brief nod. Inside, The sound of the arena was enormous and close. George was 4 songs in now, and the crowd was a sustained, warm roar, completely given over. Dale was waiting in the corridor outside the production hub. He saw Robbie before Robbie saw him, and Claire watched her father's face in the 2 or 3 seconds before Robbie registered his presence. Watched the sequence of expressions that moved across it with the speed of things that have been held back for a long time and are finally being released. Recognition, then something that looked like physical pain, then the deliberate composure of a man deciding to stand his ground. Robbie stopped when he saw him. 3 feet of corridor between them. The 2 men looked at each other. "Robbie," Dale said. Robbie's jaw was tight. His eyes were doing the same thing they'd done in the bar, that careful containment of something large and unruly. "I know what you're going to say," Robbie said. "You don't," Dale said quietly. "Because I haven't said it yet." A pause. "Say it then," Robbie said. Dale drew a slow breath. The corridor was empty except for the 3 of them. Claire had stepped back slightly, giving them space without leaving. Somewhere above them, the arena roared softly. "I approved the modification to your contract," Dale said. "I initialed the clause on page 7 that reduced your royalty rate. I did it because Donna Hargrove made it clear that my consulting arrangement with her label was at risk if I didn't cooperate, and I made the decision to protect my own income instead of protecting you." He paused. "I've been telling myself for 18 months that it wasn't as bad as it was. And it was as bad as it was." "I'm sorry, Robbie. That's all I have. I'm sorry." The silence after that was the kind that has texture. It wasn't empty. It was full. Full of the weight of what had just been said, and the weight of the response that wasn't yet formed. Robbie looked at him for a long time. His expression moved through several things. Anger, yes, clear and real and deserved, but also something more complicated underneath it. Something that looked like grief, the specific grief of a person confronting the gap between who they believed someone to be and who that person turned out to be. "You were the first person in this industry who told me I was the real thing," Robbie said. His voice was level, but it cost him something to keep it level. "That meant more to me than you know. More than any contract. More than any album deal." He paused. "That's what makes it so hard. Not the money. The money is a problem I can fight. But the..." He stopped, started again. "You believed in me, and then you let someone use that against me, without even telling me." "Yes," Dale said. "That's exactly what happened." Another silence. "I don't know what to do with that yet," Robbie said. "I can't tell you I forgive you right now. I might get there. I don't know." "You don't have to," Dale said. "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" Dale hesitated. "I'm asking if you'll let me try to fix what I can fix," he said. "The contract, the royalty structure. I have documentation that Donna Hargrove pressured me, that the decision wasn't made freely. I haven't used it because I was protecting myself. I'm done protecting myself." Robbie looked at him for a long moment. "That's a start," he said finally. "Not warmth, not yet, maybe not for a long time, but not a door closed either. A door very slightly ajar. Down the corridor, from the direction of the stage wing, they heard the crowd rise again. A great sustained wave of it. The sound that a crowd makes when something particularly beautiful has just happened. Robbie turned his head toward the sound. "Is that George?" Claire confirmed. "He's been out there for almost 20 minutes. Something moved across Robbie's face. He stood very still for a moment, listening to the crowd. Then he looked at Dale. "Is there a guitar I can borrow?" The stage manager's name was Lisa Pendergast, and she had worked Heritage Awards night for 9 consecutive years. and she was quite certain that what she was witnessing in the stage wing at 10:23 in the evening was something she would be describing to people for the rest of her career. George Strait was rapping his fifth song, which had stretched organically into a sixth because the crowd had simply not allowed him to stop, responding to each natural conclusion point with the kind of sustained roar that made stopping feel impolite. And he was leaning into the microphone to say something to the audience when the stage wing door opened and Robbie Callahan walked in. He was still in street clothes. He was carrying a borrowed acoustic guitar, a Martin D28 that belonged to one of the house musicians. Slightly different from what he would have chosen, but serviceable. Tuned correctly by sound engineer Mark Dressler in the 3 minutes they'd had backstage. He looked like a man who had been somewhere difficult and come back changed by it. Not defeated, but different, wearing the change openly. He stopped in the wing and looked out at the stage where George Strait was standing. George, facing the audience, couldn't see him, but Terry Kowalski could. Terry was positioned at the drum kit at an angle that gave him a view of both the stage and the wing, and he saw Robbie standing there with the guitar. And a very slight smile moved across Terry's face, and he said something quietly to the guitarist next to him. The guitarist looked over, looked back at Terry, nodded once. On the stage, George was saying something into the microphone, his voice carrying that particular quality of live speech that doesn't perform itself, that simply says what it means. He was thanking the audience for the unexpected gift of the evening, for the generosity of staying with something unrehearsed, for the reminder, which he said he needed sometimes, even now, even after 5 decades, that the music was bigger than the industry around it, that the music would outlast every contract dispute and label strategy and industry machinery, because the music was the thing people actually wanted, the thing that connected them to each other and to something they couldn't quite name. "I want to play one more for you," he said, "and I'd like some company for it, if he's willing." He turned and looked directly at the wing, directly at Robbie. 12,000 people turned their heads. Robbie Callahan walked out onto the stage of Bridgestone Arena for the second time that evening. And the first time was a night he had performed as a headliner. Celebrated, planned, rehearsed, within an inch of its life. This second time, there was no plan, no rehearsal, no set list, no lighting cue. Just 12,000 people and a borrowed guitar and a man who had been playing music since before Robbie was born, standing there with his hand extended. Robbie shook it. The crowd did something then that crowds do not often do in an arena. They went quiet. Not the silence of indifference, but the silence of total attention. The silence of 12,000 people leaning forward simultaneously, feeling that they were about to witness something that was not on any schedule or script. George leaned toward Robbie and said something very quietly, inaudible to the microphones, inaudible to the crowd. Robbie listened. Then he nodded. George stepped back to his microphone. "This one's called The Chair," he said simply, and he began to play. From the production hub, Claire watched the monitors. She was aware, in the distant way of someone who is fully present in a moment, and therefore outside of time slightly, that this broadcast was going to be spoken about for years. The shot composition that the broadcast director, an instinctive man named Ray Holcomb, was finding. The wide shot of the two of them together on stage, then the close on George, then the close on Robbie, then back to wide to capture the crowd, was the kind of directing that didn't come from preparation, that came from recognizing something real and getting out of its way. Robbie was playing rhythm guitar, supporting George's lead, his head down in the focused posture of a musician listening carefully to another musician and responding to what he hears. He wasn't trying to take anything. He was simply there, in the music, present in the way that the best musicians are present. not performing presence, but inhabiting it. At a certain point in the song, George stepped back from his microphone and nodded at Robbie. Robbie stepped forward and sang. His voice, in the arena's acoustic space, with no preparation and no sound check and an unfamiliar guitar, was imperfect in the way that honest things are imperfect. A slight roughness in the low notes, a crack in one of the high ones, the sound of a voice that had spent the last 3 hours carrying something heavy. But underneath the imperfection was the thing Dale had heard in a small venue on Division Street 4 years ago. The thing that had made him call Bill Reeves that same night. The unguarded honesty of a person who hadn't learned yet to protect themselves, or who had been through something that had returned them to that place. 12,000 people were absolutely silent. Donna Hargrove watched from the front row. She had returned to her seat sometime in the fourth song, settling into it with the composed stillness of someone who had weighed her options and arrived at a position. She had watched George play. She had watched the crowd. She had felt, in the specific way of a person who reads rooms as a professional skill, the emotional temperature of the arena. And what she felt was something she did not have a framework for, which was itself notable because Donna Hargrove had frameworks for most things. When Robbie walked out, she had gone very still. She watched him cross the stage and shake George's hand and take his position. She watched the crowd's response. She watched Robbie's face, the openness of it, the absence of calculation, the quality of someone who has nothing left to hide. She thought about Claire Whitmore standing in her suite and saying, "That's not context. That's manipulation," in a voice that had not risen, had not shaken, had simply been clear. She thought about 30 years of building something and the specific brittleness of structures built on pressures applied to people's weaknesses. When Robbie stepped forward and began to sing, something moved through the arena that Donna could feel physically. A shift in the air, a collective release of breath, 1,000 people leaning simultaneously in the same direction. It was not something she had manufactured or controlled or managed into existence. It was simply what happened when someone told the truth in a room large enough to hold it. She sat with this for a long time. After the show, after the broadcast signed off, and the arena lights came up, and the 12,000 people began their slow migration toward the exits in a state of collective warmth that the post-show social media would later describe in 100 different ways. Historic, unrehearsed magic. The night Nashville remembered what it was for, Dale Whitmore stood in the emptying backstage corridor and called his lawyer. The call was brief. He had made the decision before he made the call, which was the way decisions like this worked. You didn't make them on the phone. You made them in the quiet before. And the phone call was simply the enactment of what had already happened inside. He told his lawyer he had documentation relating to coercive business practices by an executive at Hargrove Records, and that he intended to make it available in full to Robbie Callahan's legal team and to the Heritage Awards Executive Board, and that he understood what this would cost him and had decided to proceed regardless. His lawyer was quiet for a moment and then said, "Dale, I have to advise you that—" "I know what you have to advise me," Dale said. "I've already decided." Another pause. Then, in a different tone, "Okay, I'll start preparing the documentation package. You'll need to come in Monday." "Monday," Dale confirmed. He hung up, stood in the corridor with the phone in his hand. The sound of the arena was changing around him. The broad roar of 12,000 people thinning and sorting itself into smaller sounds. Voices in conversation. The rumble of the floor under departing feet. The creak of the building settling back into itself after the weight of the evening. He thought about his daughter. He found Claire in the script room, the room where she had spent most of the evening. the room that smelled of coffee and printer paper, and the specific intellectual residue of hours of concentrated work. She was packing her bag, script pages stacked and ordered, laptop closed and in its case, the red pen capped and in its designated pocket in her bag. She looked up when he came in, and her face was careful, the way faces are when the person wearing them has been through something large and is managing the distance between the largeness and the moment. "I called my lawyer," he said. She looked at him. "I'm going to provide the documentation to Robbie's team," he said. "Everything I have, the communications from Donna, the sequence of events, the coercion. I'm going to make it available." "That means the consulting arrangement is over," she said. "Yes." "That means Donna will—" "Yes, probably." He met her eyes. "I know what it means." She stood for a moment with her bag over her shoulder, and her expression doing the complex work of processing something that exists in multiple registers simultaneously. Relief and grief and love, and the particular difficulty of being the child of a person who is capable of both failure and correction. "I'm proud of you," she said. The words were quiet and precisely weighted. Not forgiveness of what had happened, not a declaration that everything was resolved, but a true statement about what he had chosen to do with the truth when it was finally in front of him. "I let that kid down," Dale said. "Yes," she agreed. "And you're going to do what you can to make it right." She paused. "That's not nothing." He nodded, looked down at the floor for a moment, at the standard industrial carpet of backstage production spaces everywhere, gray and functional and worn. "Your mother would have handled this better than I did," he said. "Probably," Claire said, with the small, dry honesty of a daughter. "She handled most things better than you did." Something shifted in his face. Not quite a smile, but the shape of one, the ghost of it, something in the direction of it. "That's true." George Strait was in the loading dock area when Robbie found him, which was where George always ended up after shows. Not the green room, not the hospitality suite, but somewhere practical and utilitarian and near an exit. He was sitting on a road case with his jacket off and his guitar back in its case at his feet, talking with Terry Kowalski about the set. Terry saw Robbie coming and gave him a nod and found somewhere else to be. Robbie stopped in front of George. "Thank you," he said. The words were inadequate, and he knew it, and he said them anyway, because inadequate words spoken honestly were better than precise words that didn't quite mean what they said. George looked at him. "You sounded good out there tonight," he said. "Under the circumstances." "Borrowed guitar and no sound check," Robbie said. "The best performances are usually the ones where something goes wrong first," George said. "Discomfort gets you out of your head." Robbie was quiet for a moment. Then, "I was in a bar 3 blocks from here 2 hours ago, thinking my career might be over." "It's not," George said simply. "You don't know that." "I've been doing this 50 years, George said. "I've watched a lot of careers. The ones that end early almost always end because the person lost the thing that made them good. The hunger, the honesty, whatever it is. Not because of a contract dispute." He paused. "You've still got yours. I could hear it from stage." Robbie looked at him. "You heard something I couldn't feel tonight." "That's what people on the outside are for sometimes," George said. Then, with a slight change of tone, not heavier, just more direct. "What are you going to do about the contract situation?" "Claire Whitmore brought me documentation," Robbie said. "Her father is going to cooperate. His lawyer's involved." He paused. "It's going to be a thing." "It should be a thing," George said. "I know." Robbie looked down for a moment. "I'm angrier than I've been letting myself feel. I think I've been managing it because if I let myself actually feel it, I might." He stopped. "You might what?" "I don't know. Do something I'd regret. Say something on camera I can't take back. "That's not anger," George said. "That's wisdom recognizing that anger needs space before it needs an audience." He looked at Robbie steadily. "Give it the space. Then feel it. Then decide what to do with it." A pause. In that order. Robbie stood with this for a moment. "My first real concert," he said. "Denton, Texas. You played a summer festival. I was 11 years old. My dad took me." George looked at him, and something in his expression shifted. Not surprise exactly, but recognition of a particular kind of weight that certain statements carry. "Is he still around? Your dad?" "Yeah," Robbie said. "He drives a truck in Denton. Hasn't missed a show of mine in 4 years." He paused. "He's going to hear what happened tonight on the radio tomorrow, and he's going to call me before 7 in the morning, because that's when he gets up." George smiled, a full, genuine one. "What are you going to tell him?" Robbie thought about it, thought about the borrowed guitar and the sound check that didn't happen, and 12,000 people going quiet at the same moment, and the arm George had extended across a stage in front of all of them. The simple, ordinary, dignified gesture of one musician welcoming another. "I'm going to tell him I got to play with George Strait tonight," he said, "and that it was the strangest night of my career, and that somehow it turned out okay." George picked up his jacket from where it lay folded on the road case. He stood up, which took slightly longer than it once had, because that was what 74 years asked of a person. And he put the jacket on and smoothed it. "Tell him," George said, "that the music always outlasts the mess around it." He picked up the guitar case. "That's what I tell mine." He extended his hand. Robbie shook it. Outside, Nashville was doing what Nashville does after a certain hour. Settling into itself, the neon still burning on Lower Broadway, the music still coming from the open doors of the bars, the Cumberland River running black and quiet a few blocks east. The air was cold and smelled of October, of something ending and something else not yet begun. Donna Hargrove left through a side entrance and got into a waiting car, and sat in the back of it with her phone in her hand and the city moving past the window, and she thought about what she was going to do, which was something she had not entirely decided yet, which was itself unusual because Donna Hargrove almost always knew what she was going to do. She thought about Claire Whitmore's voice, that flat, clear, unrising voice saying, "That's manipulation." She thought about 30 years of choices, the ledger of them, the weight. She was not a woman given to sentiment. She was not going to reconstruct herself into someone uncomplicated by mourning. But she was, for the first time in a long time, aware of the difference between what she had built and what she had broken in the building of it. And this awareness was not comfortable. And she sat with its discomfort in the back of the car as Nashville passed by outside, and she did not look away from it. Claire drove home along the river road, the Cumberland running dark beside her, the city thinning out behind her into the residential blocks, and the quiet streets of a Tuesday night approaching midnight. She had the window cracked and the radio off, and she was driving in the particular silence of someone who has used a great deal of herself in the last several hours and is taking stock of what remains. She thought about her father. She thought about the fact that loving someone and being disappointed by them were not mutually exclusive states, that in fact they were often most intensely present together, that the depth of disappointment was usually a precise measure of the depth of the love. She had learned this at some point. She couldn't say exactly when, the way you can't say exactly when you learn to read, only that there was a before and an after. She thought about Robbie Callahan walking out onto that stage in street clothes with a borrowed guitar and a crowd of 12,000 people going absolutely silent. She thought about her father, standing in the corridor with his face open and unprotected, saying yes to a question he hadn't wanted to be asked, and the particular courage of that. The small, unglamorous, private courage of a person admitting a true thing without softening it. She thought about the fact that she had gone to Donna Hargrove's suite and said what she said and left before Donna could reframe it, and how that had felt. Not triumphant, nothing so clean as triumphant, but solid. The way things feel when they are aligned with what you actually believe. She turned off the river road onto her street. The apartment building was quiet, the parking lot half empty, the exterior lights making small yellow pools on the pavement. She parked and sat in the car for a moment with the engine off. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "Thank you for all of it. I know it cost you something too." She read it twice. Then she typed back, "Monday. Call your lawyer early. Don't wait until the afternoon." 3 dots appeared, indicating he was typing. Then, already set for 9 a.m. She put the phone in her bag and got out of the car. The October air was cold and clean, and smelled faintly of something burning somewhere far off. Leaves, probably, someone's backyard fire. She stood beside her car for a moment and looked up at the sky, which was partly clouded, the stars visible in gaps between the cloud cover. Nashville's light pollution softening them, but not erasing them. She thought about Robbie Callahan at 11 years old in Denton, Texas, watching a man play guitar and deciding, with the absolute irrational certainty of childhood, what his life was going to be. She thought about herself at 11 years old, sitting in the back of her father's production van outside an arena in Memphis, watching him work, watching the way he moved through a building full of music and logistics and human complexity, with the focused love of someone who had found the thing he was for, and deciding, in that same irrational certain way, that she wanted to do something like that too, to be inside the thing, to help it happen. She had done that. She was doing it. Even tonight, especially tonight, she had been doing exactly that, though not in the way any schedule had anticipated. She walked toward her building. The next morning, the reviews and the social media and the industry trades were unanimous in a way that the industry trades almost never were about anything. The Associated Press called it the most memorable moment in Heritage Awards history. The country music fan forums were flooded overnight with videos shot on phones from the arena. Shaky, imperfect, acoustically compromised, and somehow more affecting for all of that, of the moment Robbie Callahan walked out onto the stage and George Strait extended his hand. The clip had 4 million views by 8 in the morning. A journalist at the Nashville Tennessean who had been in the press section ran a piece with the headline, "What happened at Bridgestone last night was not planned." That was the point. The piece was shared widely enough that it was trending before noon. What none of the reviews mentioned, because none of the reviews knew about it yet, was the meeting that had taken place the following Monday morning in the offices of Dale Whitmore's attorney, at which Dale presented a full documented account of the coercive business practices employed by Donna Hargrove in relation to Robbie Callahan's contract amendment, with supporting communications and a signed statement. Robbie Callahan's legal team was present. A representative of the Heritage Awards Executive Board was present. That meeting would have its own consequences, unfolding over the weeks and months that followed in the deliberate, unglamorous way that institutional accountability actually unfolds. Not in a single dramatic moment, but in a sequence of smaller moments, each one requiring someone to choose, again and again, to keep telling the truth when the easier path was still available. Donna Hargrove retained her own counsel the following Tuesday. What she chose to do with it remained, for the time being, her own decision to make. Pete Shriver called Robbie at 7:45 in the morning, before the 7 a.m. call from his father in Denton. because his father had heard something on the radio at 6 and couldn't wait. "Your dad called me first," Pete said. When Robbie finally answered his own phone, he said you weren't picking up. "I was asleep," Robbie said. "He cried," Pete said. "Your dad. On the phone with me, a little bit. Don't tell him I know that." "He told me to tell you," Pete said. "That was the whole point of the call." Robbie lay on his back in the hotel room. He hadn't gone home to his apartment the night before, had ended up in a hotel 3 blocks from the arena, too tired to drive and too wound up to sleep for the first 3 hours, and stared at the ceiling and thought about his father driving a truck in Denton, listening to country radio at 6 in the morning the way he always did, hearing his son's name, pulling over. "How are you doing?" Pete said. "I don't know yet," Robbie said honestly. "Ask me in a week." "Fair," Pete said. "For what it's worth. What you did last night, going back in there, going out on that stage. George asked me." "I know George asked you," Pete said. "You still had to say yes." Robbie was quiet for a moment. "It felt right," he said finally. It was an inadequate description of a complex thing, but it was true. And sometimes true and inadequate was what you had. "Yeah," Pete said. "I could tell." 3 weeks later, Robbie Callahan played a sold-out show at the Ryman Auditorium. He had played the Ryman before, twice as a supporting act, once as a headliner on a smaller bill. This time it was different, for reasons that had nothing to do with the size of the crowd or the arrangement on the marquee. It was different because he walked out knowing something he hadn't known before. Not just about the industry, or about contracts, or about the people who had failed him, but about himself, about the quality of his own stubbornness, about what happened when you walked out of a building in street clothes with nothing but your phone and your keys, and then, 3 hours later, walked back in and picked up a borrowed guitar. He played for 2 hours and 15 minutes. He did not play The Chair. That song belonged to the night it had happened, belonged to the version of it that lived in the phone videos and the reviews and the memory of 12,000 people. He did not try to recapture it. Instead, he played his own songs, the ones from the first 2 albums and the new ones he had been writing in the weeks since. And somewhere in the middle of the set, he played a new song that he hadn't played publicly before, that he had written in his hotel room the morning after the Heritage Awards while staring at the ceiling. The song was about a man who learns something true about someone he trusted, and what he does with the truth, and what happens to the relationship afterward. Not a resolution, not a reconciliation, not a clean ending, but something more honest than either. The beginning of a long, slow process of deciding what a thing is worth and how much of yourself you're willing to put into the work of continuing it. He didn't announce the song or explain it, he just played it. The Ryman, which had heard a great many songs in its long life, went quiet in the particular way it went quiet for things that were real. Dale was in the audience. He had bought a ticket through the regular public sale, 3rd row, slightly left of center. He had not told Robbie he was coming. He had not told Claire, though she found out, because Claire had a way of knowing things, and she had sent him a text that morning that said only, "Good," which he had read several times and which had felt like the right amount of words. He sat in his seat with his program on his knee and watched Robbie Callahan play the Ryman. And he listened to the new song when it came, and he did not look away from it. And the feeling it produced in him was not comfortable, but it was clarifying. The way things are clarifying when they are precisely accurate, when they describe something real without softening it or inflating it, when they say the thing and mean it. After the show, he did not go backstage. He walked out with the crowd into the Nashville night, past the neon and the music and the river somewhere beyond the buildings, and he drove home. and he sat in his kitchen for a while with a cup of coffee going cold on the table in front of him, thinking about what came next. What came next was not simple. What came next was a legal process that would take months and cost him money he didn't have, and professional relationships he had spent decades building. What came next was the work of being a different version of himself than the version that had initialed a clause on page 7. Not a perfect version, not a version that had never been afraid or selfish or willing to look away from a thing he should have looked at, but a version that was trying, now, to look at things clearly. What came next was also, on a Thursday afternoon 2 weeks later, a phone call from Robbie Callahan. The call was not long. It was not warm, exactly. Not yet. Maybe not for some time. But it was a call, which was more than the silence that had preceded it. Robbie said, "My lawyer says your documentation is going to matter. I wanted to call and tell you that." Dale said, "It should have been there from the beginning." Robbie said, "Yeah, it should have." A pause. "My dad says hi." Robbie said, "He's a fan of yours. Has been for years. I never told him what happened." Dale sat with that for a moment. "Thank him for me," Dale said. "I will," Robbie said. And then, after another pause, with the careful economy of someone who is offering something small but real, "I'll be in touch." "I'll be here," Dale said. The Cumberland River ran the same way it always had, brown and steady and indifferent to the particular dramas of the city on its banks, carrying whatever it carried toward wherever it was going. On the bridge above it, in the early morning before the city woke, the light was gray and clean, and the air smelled of cold water, and the particular edge of a season changing. Nashville was already writing the story of what had happened that October night, the way it wrote all its stories. Partly in music, partly in gossip, partly in the industry trade papers, and partly in the accumulated private memory of the people who had been there, each of whom carried a slightly different version of it, true in its own particular way. The version that George Strait carried was simply this: a good night of music, unexpected, better for being unexpected, the way the best nights always were. The version that Robbie Callahan carried was more complicated, and would continue to be complicated for a long time, unresolved at its edges, still being written, which was, he was learning, the only honest shape a story like this could take. The version that Claire Whitmore carried was the one she would return to years later, when she was writing something else entirely, when the night had receded enough to become part of the landscape of her life, rather than the immediate terrain of it. She would return to the image of her father's face in the stage wing, in the low light, saying yes to her question. She would return to it not as a judgment, not as evidence of failure or of redemption, both of which felt too large and too clean, but as a picture of a person at a particular moment choosing, in the small, ordinary, private way that most choices are made, to tell the truth. That was enough to build on. That was what you built on, when you built on anything.